Good afternoon, everyone. Please welcome to Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Committee. I'm Supervisor Sylvia Arenas, and I'll be chairing. Next to me is Supervisor Joe Simidian, and you'll see up on the dais from our county executive. And maybe what I'll do is I'll allow folks to introduce themselves because this is a little different from what we've done before, but I'll do this in respect to some new coworkers that we have, new colleagues up here on the dais. So I'll ask Ms. Gallegos if you could help us with begin that introduction yourself and carry that on.
Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive, and I'm going to go to the left.
Good afternoon. Elizabeth Pianca, Assistant County Counsel.
Jacqueline Anciano, Director of Planning and Development.
Chris Lamb, Deputy Director in Roads and Airports.
Joe Aguilera, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation.
Good afternoon, Edgar Nolasco, Director for SEPA.
Good afternoon, KJ Kaminsky, Acting Director, Office of Supportive Housing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to get to know some of the folks here as we begin this meeting. I'm going to gavel us in because why not use a gavel at the beginning of a committee. And so we're going to begin by taking roll call and asking our wonderful clerk to do that to help establish quorum.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairperson Simidian.
Here.
Chairperson Arenas,
I'm here too.
you have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. And so we're going to go into item number 2. This is public comment. This public comment is for anyone who can, and you have an opportunity to share comments about anything that is not on today's agenda. So if you see it on today's agenda, please wait for that item number. But if you are in person and like to share public comment, we ask you fill out the yellow card. Or if you're enjoying this meeting online, please raise your virtual hand. And we'll start with in-person public comment.
We have 5 speakers in chambers,
Wonderful.
so 3 minutes on the clock, correct? I don't see any Zoom hands.
Wonderful, thank you, yes.
Our first speaker is Steve Rispoli, and then if you would like to line up after him, Balu Sharma, Shanine Tonic, Jim Substat, and Kim Cadley. Whenever you're ready.
Whenever ready? Okay. Can folks on the Zoom call here, am I loud enough? Okay, great.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Steve Rispoli, for the record. Supervisor, committee, thank you for hearing us today. I'm speaking on behalf of a neighborhood community located in an unincorporated pocket in the county commonly referred to as Cambrian Park. More specifically, the neighborhood surrounding 14936 Sutton Drive, where there have been builder's remedy preliminary proposals submitted. Trust me, we empathize with the need to build more affordable housing in the state. But with AB 1893, that takes away affordability element for up to 10 units on less than 1 acre if there is no approved housing element. The most recent preliminary plan takes advantage of this loophole, placing 10 3-story townhomes directly in the middle of this residential area. We realize that laws written at the state level tie the hands of local government. We realize that the HCD has not approved the county's proposed housing element, as recently as last week. We realize that until that is approved, developers will have free rein to take advantage of this loophole. Once the county gets its plan approved, the state will not be able to mandate haphazard development like this proposal to the county and our neighborhood. The county proposed housing element is very methodical. In urban areas, it has identified lots next to major cross streets. Lee and Camden in our neighborhood would be an example. Since this was submitted before plan approval, this proposal will be grandfathered in, allowing it to be a rare exception once the housing element is approved. And we're talking a residential street, not a major intersection. We understand that the county will follow through with CEQA and other means to inform government decision makers and the public about potential environmental effects of proposed activities to prevent significant, avoidable environmental damage. People within this neighborhood will be more than happy to provide any input into the evaluations. We know the area the best. So we ask, how concerned is this committee and the county with haphazard and flawed proposals like this? Have any similarly impacted neighborhoods or groups come forward? Finally, most important, can Supervisor Arenas work directly with us to resolve this? We believe that would be the most effective. If not the supervisor, who is the highest level representative reporting to the supervisor who can? Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be speaking on the same topic as Steve did, and just adding a few more things. And we are your district very specifically, as Steve highlighted, we all want affordable housing, but the means matter, not just the end. You can't, when you build, and the AB 1893, which just passed out there, and I know people here don't vote on it. A lot of laws are, handed down to us. They can build 10 units without any affordable housing component, and that's exactly what they've proposed in our neighborhood. I'm the next door person who lives right next door. And I'm sure the county is doing all it can to get its housing element approved, but the state is becoming increasingly difficult. The HCD isn't approving plans as rapidly, creating these haphazard developments, right? We walked in our neighborhood and we tell people and they look at us go, what? This could happen? I mean, when the county has an approved plan, as Steve said, in the approved plan, the county isn't suggesting every single residential neighborhood. You could put townhouses everywhere, right? They know that intuitively, from a health, safety, and environment perspective, the infrastructure just doesn't support it. And so, yeah, the housing element that county has submitted has a lot in near across major streets where they can they're recommending increase the housing density and so forth. There's a lot of issues around, the health, safety, and so forth. Our neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks. It doesn't have a storm drain, I think very unique. So kids going to school, we could get into all those details too, parking, 20 townhouses right there. And by the way, this lot is like, it kind of two streets intersect at the corner. So it's just going to be a big mess. And we're not sure, what the county plan is, and to make sure that there's a method to this madness and you're able to work with us to understand our concerns going forward on this project. And as Steve suggested, we would like somebody, ideally, who represent our district, you guide us in saying, hey, this is how, work with us in making this project, and mitigating and any concerns relating to this project. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shanine Tonek. Thank you very much for your time in this very tough situation. There's a lot of us who feel very deeply about this. My husband and I bought in this area 17 years ago because it was a quiet neighborhood, community, and schools. With the building of these homes going in, it's going to change the dynamic of that neighborhood. The schools are already significantly impacted. They're very full. The ratios in the classrooms are substantial and the teachers struggle. Not to mention the impact in the neighborhood with the infrastructures that are already there. We have 3 big developments going up in our neighborhood already of high-density housing, and there's no added infrastructure on the books going in for those as it is. So we're adding more people, more cars to these neighborhoods, but not adding anything else to it. I do understand that there is a need for housing. In this situation, I agree with ADUs, but when you're putting 10 more buildings on one lot, and that significantly impacts a small neighborhood. I'm really hoping that we can get your guys' backing on this to get some other options that come through that we can maybe make this a better situation for everybody involved. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Jim Stubstad, another neighbor in the area of 14936 Sutton. I wanted to come here and speak today because this project going in under builder's relief with the peculiarity under AB 1893 that would allow up to a 10-unit development without any affordable housing provision in it is in effect. As others have said here, we're not all NIMBY about this. We recognize the county's responsibility and our responsibility as residents of a neighborhood to welcome more density into build-out areas. This was originally submitted as a 5-unit plan and was changed recently to a 10-unit plan, I believe, in light of the provisions of AB 1893 regarding up to 10 units without affordable housing provisions. And as others have pointed out here, this is a bubble because of an unfortunate situation that the state's drive toward affordable housing has put the county into. We totally sympathize with that, and we're all about working with the county, being part of the solution and helping everybody look good and have the county we want in the end game. I want to reiterate the point that this particular parcel has a very narrow street frontage. It's a large triangular lot. It's at the back of 2 curved streets that are long, full blocks from major intersections. So anybody accessing this is going to transit the whole length of quiet residential streets. There are already issues with people not being aware of the environment and speeding down those streets. As it's been pointed out, no sidewalks, kids, pets, all of that. It's not a good place for high density. So we want to work with you, and we want to find something that works better for everybody. And we would very much like to work with Supervisor Arenas or her office if it's not possible to work with her directly on this. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name's Kim Kading, and I echo all the concerns of those that spoke before me. So I'll be really brief in that I just found out about this a few days ago. I live on the corner of this area. My house would be a much better place for this, but I believe it's 48 feet opening, this lot that they're planning on, that they've submitted for. And so there has been no community awareness. Honestly, we found out like 5 or 6 days ago. There's nothing to us. None of our input, no, I don't see it on Instagram or wherever we're supposed to be able to see these things. So I have concern about the narrow driveway, the safety of it. They have an ADA unit in there, but it's curious to me because we also have no sidewalks. And so no sidewalks, we all walk on the street, and the kids all cycle in the street, and the tricycles are in the street, everything we do in the street. So that's just a concern for putting that many cars and that many kids out in the street. And then the plan just about covers every inch of soil, just with buildings and concrete and driveway. So, but it's not also the same. I'm not against more housing in there, but 10 units, and it just seems like there's no forethought. So, except for by the developers and investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Typically, just to let our audience know that typically we don't tend to respond to public comment, as it is not on our agenda. So I won't do that. But I will ask my team member who is in the audience, if you could raise your hand. She can step out and speak with you whenever you see convenient. Vicky, I'll leave it up to you, either Vicky or Mariela, so that we can connect. All right, so I'm going to continue on with our agenda. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And like I said, we normally don't comment on public comment because it isn't on our agenda, but we hear you loud and clear, and my office is going to connect with you. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 3, this is consent calendar, and already on consent calendar are items 11 through 14. I'd like to add items 6 and 8 to consent, Vice Chair, and I'm wondering if you have any changes, and we can get a motion on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the consent calendar as contained in our published addenda, and as you've suggested, include as well item number 8. I would, however, like to ask that item number 6 stay on the agenda because I have some questions and concerns about that item.
Perfect. Okay. Wonderful. So then that is motion. The motion is for items 8, 11 through 14. Correct?
So move.
Perfect. Okay.
We have no speakers, and for the vote, Vice Chairperson Semidian.
Aye.
Chairperson Arenas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to move into our regular agenda. This is item number 4, and item number 4 is the annual University of California Cooperative Extension Program report, and so I'm going to hand it over to Edgar Nolasco from our Consumer and Environmental Protection Agency. I'm not sure if you have any other members you'd like to invite to discuss this report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Edgar Nolasco, SEPA Director. I have the pleasure of introducing our interim Ag Commissioner, Ag and Weights and Sealer, Drew Raymond, and with him we have Sheila Berry, which is our UC Cooperative Extension Director for Santa Clara County.
Wonderful, thank you. And can you give me the last name of the commissioner once again?
Raymond, Drew Raymond.
Drew Raymond.
Raymond, yes.
Okay, sorry.
And he is
I don't see the president
here presenting this item today.
Perfect, thank you. You know, my eye normally goes this way, so I apologize I didn't see you all there. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Is that working? I don't think it's on. There it goes. Okay, sorry about that. Supervisor Arenas and Supervisor Semidian, thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you UC Cooperative Extension's Santa Clara County's annual report. With support from the county and through a really strong partnership with the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency, we serve Santa Clara County, bringing research-based information to improve the lives and solve problems in our community. Our programs also leverage county funding, direct and indirect, to bring funding from the state, federal, government, and contracts and grants. And this past year, every county dollar was matched by at least $7 from other sources to support UC Cooperative Extension efforts. Our staff, and several of them are here with us today to answer questions if necessary. We have about 25 FTE that are supported with state, grant, and county fundings and support county support programs, including 4-H youth development, nutrition education, small farm, urban agriculture, livestock agriculture, compost education, and master gardeners. And while the report includes accomplishments from all our programs, I'm just going to highlight a few of our program efforts today. Our 4-H youth development program includes after-school and 4-H club programs, and the focus is really on career and college readiness. And as an example, this year we had a training and job opportunities for Latinx youth to lead youth programs. Our UC CalFresh Healthy Living Program is a nutrition education, and it's supported 33 policy and system changes in 30 sites in the county to make healthier choices easier and doable. These changes have resulted in improved school meals and increased physical activity in after-school programs. Our UC Master Gardeners donated over 31,000 service education hours and shared over 6,000 pounds of produce with our community. A newer effort of our Master Gardeners is teaching hands-on gardening at Elmwood Correctional Facility. This 8-week program teaches women work skills and improves health and wellness. Our home composting education program through 45 community workshops in schools is working to reduce and manage organic waste, fight against climate change, and also is helping both the county and municipalities meet requirements for Senate Bill 1383. Our small farm program is primarily focused in the South County and has provided 39 educational workshops this year to small farms that are mostly Chinese-speaking. They're working to maintain sustainability, improve water quality, and also support food safety. Our Urban Ag and Food Systems program is hosted weekly organic farming webinars and is also supporting the Santa Clara Food Alliance as well as the South Bay Food Justice Coalition. The Ag Liaison is a county-funded position and is working to implement the Valley Ag Plan. Our liaison supported the county in getting $750,000 of federal funding to support the county's Ag Resilience Initiative. And the liaison has also supported ag sustainability with grant assistance, as well as supporting county programs, including the Livestock Pass program and the Ag Resilience Initiative. The Livestock and Natural Resource Program has provided workshops for producers and our open space managers on fire fuels management. And our Human-Wildlife Interaction Program is working to reduce and protect livestock by testing non-lethal methods to protect livestock. Our Urban Integrated Pest Management Program this year trained over 500 pest management professionals to reduce pesticide use, increase pesticide safety, and protect surface water. And I do want to mention that this coming year we will be hiring and expanding our integrated pest management program. We're hiring a new cooperative extension advisor in this area that will be located in Santa Clara County, focused on commensal rodent pest in our community and using integrated pest management practices. And finally, I wanted to mention the really outstanding efforts that we have at Marshall Cottle Park where many of our programs work. We have 17 acres there, and we are providing several programs, including our compost education program that has a demonstration site, our small farm program, and our master gardeners have an incredible 4 acres there of demonstration sites and offer training to our county residents. We also partner on the site with CalFresh Healthy Living and bring second grade classes to Marshall Cottle to learn about plant life cycles, pollinators, and how and see the benefits of growing vegetables. We also on this site have our urban ag and food system site where they have raised beds demonstrating growing vegetables in an urban setting. And then finally, we do have a 4-H youth ranch on this site where we have pasture land projects, goats and chickens and gardening with youth on this site. And so I just really want to thank you all for this opportunity to share with you our accomplishments this year, and want to provide any opportunity if you have any questions about our programs, and want to once again thank you for your continued support and our partnership with the Consumer Environmental Protection Agency.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to check with our clerk to see if there's any public comment before I look to my vice chair to see if he has any.
We have no speakers on the item.
Thank you. All right, vice chair? Oh, okay, so it allows me to begin. Thank you so much, first of all, Ms. Berry, for this presentation. And second, I didn't know which one to stop you at because I wanted to stop you at each one of them. I just thought all of them were just fabulous. I mean, from the master gardeners to the youth on-site with the chickens and the lambs and all of the different animals. I just think it's wonderful when our youth interface with what's natural to this land, although that we've all forgotten that this used to be all agricultural land at one point, right? I do remember when my parents were alive would remind me of all of those different sites. I myself got to see in San Jose some drying spots for apricots from Zoria Farms out in the east side. And so, I mean, there's just so much that we have to offer. And so I'm so glad that you continue to create and have that connection. So thank you so much for all the wonderful work that you're doing. There's some I wanted to share with you, and I don't know if you know this, and I apologize if we haven't shared it with you, but we, through our own grant program within the Board of Supervisors, each one of us provides grants to different groups, and one of those groups who approached us is a group of female farmers that have created this coalition, and it's this coalition of small agricultural farmers. It's really in Spanish. It's Coalición de Pequeños Agricultores de California. And so this is Ms. Shirley Trevino, whose contact I would love to share with you, so that if there's any opportunity to share any insight to support our small female farmers out in our area, I would love to see if there's any connection.
Yeah, so with us today is our small farm advisor and our ag liaison, and I think they both are familiar. Yeah, so they're, I think, familiar a bit with this effort, and as well have staff that can work with this group of farmers. So thank you, though. But yeah, it would be good to share, make sure that we are connected.
Yes, I would love to be on the same page with all of you in terms of your efforts. So I appreciate your response. And once again, just really thank you for all of the efforts that you've been doing out in particular in my district around some of the agricultural work, agriculture farm workers, in respect to education around pesticides and insecticides, and I think you did the same thing with growers. And then I think working conditions for farm workers or agricultural workers. And so one of the questions that I had for you is, how do we know if what we are offering in terms of education is rendering the kind of outcomes that we want, or how do we shift if we haven't made, I guess maybe I'm trying to figure out what are the outcomes of those workshops. Obviously, education, but ultimately we want to have some kind of behavioral change, right, in terms of what folks are choosing to use in their, whether it's pesticide or insecticides. Is there any follow-up where you find out from the growers if they've made any different choices?
Our programs, yes, have a robust system where we do evaluation of all our program efforts. So both in the short term and then also long term. So that would include initially surveys after people attend workshops, but then we also look out in the field for metrics of change. And I will invite Aparna actually to speak to that specifically here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You have a various number of lifelines out there in the audience, so I'm grateful.
So one of the topics we do work on is related to pesticide use, and we work very closely with the Ag Department. For example, there's little over 150 Asian growers that grow in protected cultures like greenhouses, and the type of products that are registered for use within those systems are very limited. So for the most part, they're using reduced risk or alternative ways to manage pests. So there's been a lot of effort around that topic for several years. And like Sheila mentioned, monitoring practice adoption and making sure that, it's not just educational information where they're gaining knowledge, but actual practice adoption is happening is something that we've been working on. One example of a practice is stale seed bed, where you can till the soil, irrigate it, let the weed seed germinate, and then till it again so the germinated seeds are dead by the tillage operation rather than doing a spray application. So no pesticide has been used. A lot of the growers also use steam as a way to disinfect or manage the soil-related pathogens. And so there's a lot of different practices that they've adopted in those production systems. So yes, we work very closely with the Ag Department in bringing that information to them.
Amazing. Well, you know what? I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to maybe work with one another. Our newsletter goes out on a monthly basis. It would be wonderful to highlight some of these alternative practices to create more of a common just kitchen conversation around these different alternatives. If it, obviously, farmers have a lot more knowledge around different practices. But just as a reminder for folks to encourage these kinds of alternatives, or at least I'm saying alternatives, maybe they're becoming best practices at this point. So I really appreciate the example that you provided with the stale seed bed. The other piece is and this has more to do with the working conditions for farm workers, because I know that was one of the workshops. So you would do a post-survey or post-evaluation for those farm workers or those agricultural workers that you've included in those educational workshops?
So our workshops are open to all the public, and for the most part, they tend to be attended by growers. Particularly on the farm worker side, we've done workshops along with the county on safety in the production fields around pesticide use. And there's been some follow-up to make sure that they're aware of these practices. But again, my clientele typically is the growers that I work with. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, perfect, because I think the other piece that I wanted to include is that the Latinas Contra Cancer is another group that we help fund in my district with our grant opportunities, and it would be wonderful to see if there was any way that we can create a network, because I know that there's some research that obviously impacts agriculture workers because of pesticides or different sprays that are used in agriculture and cancer, that connection. So I would love to see if there's a possibility for us to work and we can do this offline. Thank you.
Yeah, we
Thank
have
you so
staff that
much.
are fluent in Chinese and Spanish, and we try to extend information to all the communities that we work with.
Thank you. I love that. I know that sometimes it's these kinds of conversations that allow us to create these kinds of connections, right? I know that this is kind of in the back of my mind, and I was thinking, yes, I must speak to Miss Barry or Miss Julie, and then, of course, everything else happens. And so I thank you for allowing me to ask all of these questions and continue to learn from you in terms of the work that you're doing. And so I'd love to see if we can have an offline meeting and conversation, but I'll end just by congratulating you on all of the work that's being done. This is fabulous work. This is wonderful, and of course, the leadership that supports it has just been fabulous. I know that we are missing our Joe Divini, who is heading our commission. And so that was actually the last question for you, Mr. Nolasco, is to figure out how are we filling that spot?
Good afternoon, Supervisor. So a couple comments. I think you mentioned the Maria Catalan. So we have been in contact with her. She reached out to me, so we have made contact.
Perfect.
And we've established that connection, so that was great. That she's also reached out to you as well. Drew Raymond, our acting ag commissioner, can provide more information on some of the trainings that we provide to ag workers. So we recently did heat training to those employees that are out there in the heat to let them know about what type of things they can do to keep themselves safe. We do annual pesticide training, both in simple Chinese and in Spanish, by our staff. And to answer your last question, we're lucky to have Drew Raymond as an acting ag commissioner, weights and sealer, and we're doing an active recruitment for the permanent ag commissioner, working along with our deputy county executive Gallegos and the ESA executive team.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Acting Commissioner Raymond, for stepping in for us. Good luck in the search, whether you apply or not. We love local folks, but the best applicant, is going to be the one chosen by you all, and we'll welcome them just as well. So that really concludes my comments, but really my comments so that we can start really connecting a lot of the efforts that you are all doing, which are just absolutely wonderful, and my office is doing, and what we understand the community to want. By the way, the last thing, I promise this is the last thing, Doing the Rot Thing was just fabulous title of your compost program. That was just so clever. Now I will absolutely end and ask for a motion from my vice chair.
Move approval of the recommended action, which is simply to receive the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I will second that.
Vice Chairperson Semidion.
Aye.
Chairperson Arenas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And then I'm going to move on to item number 5. This is home hardening in the wildlife-urban interface.
Yes. Jacqueline Anciano, Director of Planning and Development.
Welcome.
And today with us is Deputy Director Michael Alvarez. This item was a referral from District 5 based on an inquiry from one of their constituents. And we have responded. We'd like to showcase the website that is up and the information that was available to the public in July. That was our commitment, was in July we would have the website up. And so I'll turn the presentation over to Deputy Director Alvarez.
Welcome.
Thank you. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to share our website here. It doesn't seem to be working.
No. Do,
Oh, there it is.
okay.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, so as Director Anciano was suggesting, we stood up a website to address the question of home hardening. There's a concern of trying to make structures safer, those that are located in the wildland-urban interface, those areas of high fire hazards. In this website, we provided interactive links. We received a lot of information from CAL FIRE, which is very helpful to help our customers understand, well, what is home hardening? You can click on a link or a button here and say, okay, roofs. That's an element that we can mitigate. We can install a Class A roof. There are, you can click on windows, installing dual or multi-pane windows. Tempered glass can help with the resistance of fire and intrusion of embers into structures. So this is helpful information that we received from CAL FIRE to help. We also included the references to the building code and a low-cost retrofit list from CAL FIRE. That should be very helpful to help, again, reduce the cost of providing these safety measures. And we included the Office of the State Fire Marshal. They have an approved list of wildland urban interface products that are acceptable, that are ignition resistant or non-combustible. If you move further down on the webpage, we then highlighted how the department is going to partner with our customers by trying to expedite permits for re-roof permits. These really don't require plan review. These are something that we can issue pretty quickly over the counter and require only inspections. And it will help if you install a Class A roof, that will help protect the structure from wildfire. Siding, retrofit windows, and decking surfaces are other elements of a building that require little review or no review and can be inspected in the field. You may be asking, retrofit windows, why would that require a permit? It's really the waterproofing layers, the water-resistant membranes that we were inspecting. So we want to report back. We have this, the website has been posted. We're trying everything we can to help the customers or people that are living in the high fire areas to navigate this trying time, obviously with their fire insurance and their coverage. So I'm open to any questions that you may have regarding this website.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and appreciate not only the website, but the information. I'm going to look to our clerk and see if there's any speakers.
We have no speakers on the item.
All right, so now there is no public comment. I'm going to look to my vice chair and ask him to please provide his.
Thank you. I have no questions. All I have is a thank you. This is what I asked for. It has been provided, and it's been provided on a timely basis, so I'll say thanks again and move approval of the recommended action, which is to receive the report.
I will second that.
Vice Chairperson Simitian.
No, I'm so sorry, Peggy. I apologize. I put something in my mouth, so it took a little bit longer, but I was going to ask a question. Director Alvarez, I did have one question, because actually in the last, I think, within the last 2 weeks, there was a huge fire in Evergreen. There's a lot of hillside homes, one of which is a huge village called The Villages, and they are looking, and unfortunately, they contacted my office after our grant program had already ended, but they're hoping to be able to report on the information about wildfires in their community and wanted to see if there was a grant program for neighborhood groups or for the HOAs that are interested in taking kind of these initiatives to harden homes. I still find that term thinking, what does that really mean, harden a home? Like, we're gonna beat it up. What are we gonna do for these homes to get hardened? And I don't know if there's a more I don't know, friendlier term or more explicit term that would allow us to understand and convey this message to, obviously, homes in the hillsides understand it, or maybe not all of them, I don't know.
It is, and that's why in our website we actually do define it, because this was a term that I believe
Yeah.
it was CAL FIRE had on their site. Wildfire mitigation program. I mean, that's really that's what we're trying to do. You're trying to address the structure.
Yep.
You're trying to address the surrounding
Yes.
areas.
Yes.
Defensible spaces, and there are fire-safe community programs. I think that you can see on from the Safer from Wildfires website. That's on the state website. That may be something that might help, with these larger communities, talking about HOAs, and that might be something that they can come together and impart. And then I think they need to contact the state to see if they can get some of those discounts on their fire insurance coverage. So.
Wonderful. Well, you know what? It is not only just the insurance, but I think it was the tracking that they were hoping to be able to do as a group. And so I think they were looking for some funding for iPads and for the program, to download the program and for the utilization of that program. So, but I can ask you offline, and my team can follow up and see if there's anything that we can help do, or if you could please figure that piece out, and my office will follow up with you, because it is, it did hit a little close to home, and always does, because these folks are kind of in a separate, although they're very up in the hillside, and the only saving grace is that the fire station is just down the street from them. Just 3 minutes away. So that is I think their wildfire interface that probably is the most important, is our fire station, but also preventing all of these things by updating their homes and making sure that they prevent as much as they can and harden against fire, which is the point to this. And I appreciate Supervisor Simitian for bringing this forward, as is sometimes not the thing that we all think about, but is very important to do. So I appreciate it. All right, Peggy.
Vice Chairperson Simitian.
Aye.
Chairperson Arenas.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Director Alvarez, for the information and the presentation. Okay, next we're going to move on to item number 6. This is revisions to Standards and Policies Manual Volume 1. I'm going to turn it over
To me.
Yes, I was going to drum roll you in.
Thank you. Thank you. Jacqueline Anshano, Director of Planning and Development. With us today is Nicole Collins from County Council, Daryl Wong, our Senior Land Development Engineer, Deputy Director Stuart Patry, who oversees our administration, and Senior Planner Joanna Wilk. And Joanna will begin the presentation. Joanna?
Thank you, Director Anciano. Again, I'll go ahead and give us an overview of agenda item number 6. This is regarding the minor revisions to the Standards and Policies Manual. Okay, so by way of background, this manual is a guide for engineers to use regarding land development projects in the county. This can be used for roads, water systems, grading and construction proposals, as well as subdivisions. And included in the manual are standard details that can be included in a plan set for certain types of development. This is something such as driveway turnarounds, private access roads, and other items such as energy dissipators. So the subject of the proposed revision is regarding private access roads for urban subdivisions. The county is proposing a new standard detail that could be used if the applicant wishes for subdivisions in urban areas. This detail is for roads that are not through traffic. That means it only accesses residential parcels. It does not connect one major road to another. It also reduces the existing 60-foot right-of-way standard detail to a 40-foot right-of-way. You can see an example of that on the screen here with a hypothetical 10-lot subdivision in an urban area. The red dashed line being the 60-foot right-of-way and the green dashed line being the 40-foot right-of-way. This reduction comes with the exclusion of on-street parking requirements. So parking would be provided on the residential lots as provided by our zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance. And another benefit of this is that this standard detail aligns with county roads, urban public road details. So the 40-foot right-of-way and the other details align with county roads requirements. Alongside the new standard detail, staff is proposing 2 minor ordinance amendments. First is in section C12-130B, which just clarifies that an applicant can propose a right-of-way width that doesn't necessarily have to be 60 feet wide. It can be deferred to the standard and policies manual. The second is in C12-175. It removes an out-of-date reference to the County Roads Public Roads Manual and clarifies that an applicant can utilize either the standard and policies manual for private roads or the standard details manual for a public road, whatever is utilized in their proposal. So the reasons for why we're bringing this item before you all today is because the standards and policy manual contains many areas that can be improved upon. One of which is aligning the private urban road requirements with county public urban road requirements. The department also applied for grant money with the LEAP grant in 2021. And so money obtained from this grant needs to be used to either update a planning document or implement some sort of process that facilitates the acceleration of housing production in a jurisdiction. So therefore, staff saw this as an opportunity to use this funding to update the manual and provide an option for urban subdivisions to utilize this reduced private roadway width. And then lastly, the intent of providing this option is to provide more flexibility for urban subdivisions if needed to accommodate their proposal. There is a note that this action, an action needs to be taken by the board in the end of this month in order for the department to obtain full reimbursement from the grant and fulfill the grant requirements.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to ask our clerk and see if there's any public comment.
We have no speakers on the item.
Oh, that is surprising. Vice Chair.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions and a few concerns, so hang in with me if you could, please. Sure. Why is this a good thing in plain language? Never mind grants, never mind sections. Like, you know, if we were trying to design from a planning school perspective, nice neighborhoods, good neighborhoods, why is it good to eliminate on-street parking? Why is it good to have narrower roads? You can perhaps tell from my question, I'm not convinced that either of those two things are sort of inherently good things. And I'll follow up in a minute. I'm going to have a little, we're going to have a little Socratic dialogue here if we can, please.
Sounds fun.
We got to get you some hobbies, but
right, so
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Appreciate the good attitude.
Through the chair. The intention here is that with this reduced right-of-way, it does provide flexibility for a subdivision to be performed in an urban area. Now, with a lot of the state legislation that you've probably been made aware of that's been going through recently, as the unincorporated area of unincorporated county, we want to try to focus on that housing development to be in those urban areas because of the services that they already have existing. So something as simple as reducing a right-of-way from being 60 feet to 40 feet can accommodate a residential subdivision to happen because it allows for a little bit more room for a residence to be developed. It can better accommodate setbacks that way, et cetera. To your point about parking, I understand how some red flags may go off because you no longer have street parking. However, we do have requirements in our zoning ordinance that on parcel parking needs to be provided. Specifically, it's 2 parking spaces. There's also an ordinance code in our subdivision ordinance that if no on-street parking is required, then 4 spaces need to be provided on each residential parcel. So it is considered, and so that way we see this as an opportunity to encourage some development in urban areas, but also consider parking requirements.
And if I can, Jacqueline Anciano, Director of Planning, we have been working with some of the cities, and we're trying to align our road widths with some of the city requirements, understanding that where these subdivisions are that we've recently been working on are on the outskirts of the cities that would then be annexed into the cities. So we're trying to align some of those requirements with city requirements.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understood something correctly. If there's no on-street parking, then units are required to have 4 parking spaces available on the lot, on the site?
That's my understanding. I'll go ahead and defer to Senior Civil Engineer Daryl Wong, who's in the subdivision.
See if he thinks this is fun too, so there you go. He's got a great smile, so. Hang on just a second, I don't think your mic is live.
There we go.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Sumerian. So the question was whether or not 4 parking stalls were required to be on the lot itself. That is correct. 2 of those lots would be covered parking per the zoning ordinance, as you're probably familiar. And then 2 could be actually allowed on the driveway themselves. So you could have 2 in front of your garage, so to speak. And can I add just one more thing? The developer also has an option for providing common area parking. So that parking requirement is 1.5 stalls per unit, so per lot. So if there were 10 units, for instance, they could option to have a common area parking of 15 stalls. So it gives the developer flexibility in how they want to develop their lot, as opposed to just saying that you must have on-street parking in front of on the street itself.
Through the chair, how often do the developers opt to have that kind of common parking arrangement?
We have yet to see any proposals of that nature, because I just don't think it's been in the cards thus far. Typically, our subdivisions are far more rural. This opens it up for more of an urban type setting where, that developers can utilize that option, especially now that, as Joanna previously mentioned, there are, or I think as Director Anciano mentioned, that there are developments right near urban incorporated cities where they may want to have that option to utilize common parking.
Through the chair, when you use the term of art urban, I gather in this context, urban means as compared or contrasted to rural areas, which means that urban is really what many of us would refer to as suburban development, yes? Single-family homes, yes?
Correct. Yeah, we're not talking about high rises downtown, I don't think.
If I may, through the chair. We're talking about properties that are with the expectation that they may be annexed into the city. So what we're seeing is development come in where they are desiring more flexibility, and we're trying to balance this with the city, because these are properties that may be annexed into the city that give the developer more opportunity to put parking underneath. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Anciano. Please, go right ahead.
No, that's okay.
Madam Chair, through the chair, I am, I'm trying to integrate this possibility, this proposal, with real-world experience and my observation over time. So I think it's entirely accurate, theoretically or intellectually, to talk about incorporated into the cities, but this has been a push of the county for 25 years. I remember it from when I was here in 1997. And in some cases, it's worked and it's helped. I'm thinking of Cupertino, where, you know, almost, I'm not quite exaggerating, but almost every other parcel, it seemed, was an unincorporated pocket, and eventually many of those did incorporate and are part of the city of Cupertino, and there's a more rational development plan. On the other hand, I'm thinking of San Antonio Hills in the district that I represent as well, which I think is something like 900 parcels that are unincorporated and have been for 25 years in spite of county staff's best efforts to persuade them otherwise. And so I'm thinking about what happens in a setting like that, or Stanford University, which is, I think, probably our largest quote, urban, unincorporated area, just in terms of number of units and population. So let me just say, my 25 years of county experience tells me that the incorporation may or may not happen, but I wouldn't count on it anytime soon. And I understand the desire to consider higher density housing, which I support in the right locations, but it's not really what we're talking about here. I mean, we may be talking about duplexes or fourplexes, or, but I mean, we're not talking about what I'll call a true urban setting. We're talking about essentially suburban residential development, and somehow having a standard that is, you know, a third narrower without on-street parking. I'm not sure I think that's a good thing, candidly, just in terms of design principles, and that's the, you know, Masters in City Planning from UC Berkeley and the former certified city planner, MCP, in me speaking. Let me go to a process question, which is, through the chair there, it does say under reasons for recommendation that there was forgive me, I want to find the right language here. There was a meeting called at the end of March 27th, applicants roundtable meeting, but then it goes on to say, and it was comprised of applicants who frequently submitted development projects to the county. No feedback was provided from the attendees at that meeting. So I think I'm accurate in saying that the largest developer in the unincorporated area, just in terms of number of units over time, is the university, yes? Yeah, and do we have any feedback from them at all on this proposal? And I know you can't make them comment, but I'm given how much time and energy both the university and our organization have spent on development standards over the last decade, I'd kind of hate for this to come back to us all of a sudden with an oh my God moment.
Sure. Through the chair, I can speak to the public outreach that was conducted. So in August, we did reach out to our applicants roundtable and also sent a list of notification of a public outreach meeting to our neighborhood groups associations, which did include the San Antonio Hills. Upon further review, the Stanford University representatives were actually not included on that list. But I do understand that it's important, so we would look to reach out to the Stanford representatives by the end of today and offer an individual meeting to go over this item prior to the board hearing next week.
And what, if anything, did you hear from the folks in San Antonio Hills?
We did not receive any response from them either. I could give you my guess as to why the public has been a bit silent on this. Upon further review, when we look at the potential lots that could utilize this reduction of the right-of-way, there aren't too many in our urban areas. We have a map that we can show, but there are certain lot size requirements, and so many of the parcels in our urban zones are just too small to be subdivided into two at least. So particularly with our applicants roundtable meeting, they themselves, when they're submitting proposals into our department, many of them, as Daryl said, are rural. They're not necessarily in our urban areas. Where this was coming from is there have been a few one-offs where it has been in an urban area, and it highlighted to us, oh, we don't have an appropriately sized right-of-way requirement for these minor subdivisions in our urban zones. So let's bring something that aligns with county roads requirements, provides flexibility for that small subdivision in our urban areas.
And through the chair, if I could ask you to go back, and I'm genuinely trying to understand this. Sometimes I'm argumentative, I'm told. But in this case, I'm just trying to understand. When you said we don't have appropriately sized, what in staff's best professional judgment makes these not appropriately sized? And let me just tell you my bias going into the question. I'm not sure that I'm very enthusiastic. Well, I know I'm not enthusiastic about squishing, not a planning term, but squishing single-family residential development closer to being right on top of itself. And there are times when it's appropriate to narrow a road as a traffic calming device, perhaps. But just in general, I'd like to let these neighborhoods decide for themselves through the planning process whether they'd like a little more elbow room, a little more sense of open space rather than being one on top of the other. I mean, that's why God invented setbacks. So, that's what I'm asking. Why is this quote appropriate?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and defer to Senior Civil Engineer Daryl Wong about the appropriateness, but I would like to add that this is just an option for a developer to use. They're not going to be held to it. They could propose a 60-foot right-of-way if they
Yes, but, and now I will be argumentative,
Okay.
isn't the developer going to be more inclined to say, well, if I can pave less street and have to pay less, and if I can squeeze a few more units on because I don't have to use as much for roads, that's the direction they're going to go. So I'm worried in my sort of arguing it through way that we may be incentivizing bad planning, for lack of a better phrase. Now that I've made the question even harder, I'm sorry.
Can we? What was the original question?
Well, the question is, what is it about 40 feet with no parking that is somehow, quote, more appropriate than 60 feet with parking?
I'll give you an exact example that we actually had in, it was the east side in the Alum Rock area. Maybe a couple years ago or so, we had a developer who was trying to create a subdivision, and they were connecting to a roads and airports road, so publicly maintained road, and their right-of-way in that location was indeed 40 feet. So our own public right-of-way was 40 feet. And we, on the private side, for the private subdivision, did not have a standard that was 40 feet. We only had this 60 feet or possibly a 56-foot standard. So in light of that, we recognized that the private road should not necessarily be wider in requirement width than the public road it was connecting to. So we recognized that there probably was a need for, as I guess you could say, appropriate or consistent with our own county roads and airport standards that was a 40-foot wide right-of-way width. So it allowed for narrower right-of-way. In that location, they could actually have provided perhaps parking on one side of the road, but it allowed for the right-of-way to be quote-unquote shoehorned in into this tighter location. So that would have made that development a little bit easier and more, quote unquote, appropriate, but as well consistent with the surrounding public road.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to suggest, Madam Chair, is, thank you, it's a helpful answer. Although just full disclosure, as soon as I heard the word shoehorn in, I got nervous. I think what I'd like to suggest is that we take no action on this today, including even a motion to receive the report, which I don't think we have to do. I don't think that precludes staff from bringing the item to our full board at some point in the future.
That's correct. I just wanted to underscore that it's currently scheduled for the September 10th board meeting. We have 2 in September before, as I understand it, we lose our ability to get the reimbursement on the grant, which is the driver in September.
Yes, Stuart Patry, Deputy Director, Administration. The grant period is September 30th, so that's the ending timeline. We have $50,000 allocated to staff time for this project.
Yeah, I will, and this won't surprise anybody, I will say, as I've said at just a recent meeting, whenever anybody tells me, you know, you're jammed, I push back and say, no, actually, I'm not. I don't like to feel like I'm being pressed to reach a foregone conclusion because there's no time left. I'm not saying, I'm not in a conspiracy world. I don't think anybody set it up that way. I'm just saying that's an unhappy moment for an elected official to suddenly feel that way. I do think the 2 meetings gives us enough time, but I also will say I'd like us to hear, I guess, you know, I rarely feel I can speak for any supervisor, including Supervisor Chavez, but she and I, through the years, have both expressed concern about outreach capacities of our county organization. I know you can't make people, you know, respond, and I know in the planning world that typically people respond at the 12th hour plus 5 minutes rather than well ahead of time. But in this case, I would like to wait until you've got some reaction from San Antonio Hills, which is not, you know, a handful of folks. It's, you know, pretty good sized chunk of the so-called urban unincorporated area. I heard what you said about that area probably not, frankly, being ripe for this kind of development and tool. And then also the university. And then at the university, I would just distinguish between the university itself as a developer and the residents there in the residential portions of the campus. So I'd like to encourage you to. I know my office has reached out as well to try and encourage response. We're happy to work with you, but I think you ought to ask people, look, tell us you're for it, you're against it, or you don't care. And let's see if we can get some feedback before we're obliged to take action on it. As it stands today, as you can tell, I'm more than a little skeptical and frankly not sure I would be able to be an aye vote on this item.
Well, and when we do bring this back, we'll show you the map
Yes.
so you can see where it'd likely be applicable. And I think that'll help you all with your decision making.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask that as a committee item, we just table this item indefinitely, and that would be my motion.
I'll second that.
And I was very, thank you. And I'm being specific about as a committee item so that it does not preclude the item showing up at the full board.
Is the expectation that this outreach and the responses would be conducted before this item goes to the board?
That was through the chair, that was a more complicated question than it sounds. Do I think you'll get an answer before you've agendized it? Who can say? I think it can be tough to engage people. Part of my concern is I think the engagement period was over the summer when it's hard to get academic institutions, frankly, to engage. But do I think that we need to have some answers before we take action at the board? Yeah, and that's why I would encourage you, even though I don't like to be jammed, you can schedule it for the first meeting if you want, but I think administration may then want to hold it till the second meeting if need be, if you haven't heard from anybody, because I'll be leaning in and saying, what do we hear? Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the second. And
Yes, we need a vote. Vice Chairperson Semidion?
aye.
Chairperson Arenas?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And thank you to the staff for the back and forth. I appreciate it. It was helpful.
Well, we're going to have to do a survey and see if this was actually fun. All right, so we're going to go to item number 7, to all-inclusive playground grant program report. And welcome.
Mr. Aguilar.
Good afternoon. Joe Aguilera, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation Department. I'm joined by my co-host, Josie Ruddock, Financial and Administrative Services Manager, also from Parks and Recreation. The All-Inclusive Playground Grant Program builds upon prior year's programs as in its third iteration. On September 19, 2023, the Board of Supervisors requested a report regarding options to establish a third route of funding for the grant program. Through board referral, the Parks and Recreation Department was tasked with developing an equity component to be included as part of the applicant evaluation process. As a result, equity-focused criteria were developed and presented to the Board of Supervisors on February 6, 2024. In establishing this additional criterion as part of the evaluation process, the department seeks to continue advancing equitable access for all. To clarify, the equity focus is one part of a set of criteria intended to rank proposals received through the grant submission process. Other criteria include project design, project readiness, professional capability, and proposed maintenance programs. Based on an informal survey conducted earlier this year, the department believes that there should be enough funding for any organization who has matching funds. Based on this short summary, we'll move into our visual presentation. The board established the All-Inclusive Playground Grant Program in 2017, providing matching funds to assist cities, nonprofits, school districts, and other governmental entities located and operating in Santa Clara County in building all-inclusive playgrounds in their communities. Program number 1 included $10 million in matching funds available, $2 million per supervisorial district. Funding was made available in 2 rounds. Round 1 concluded in May 2018, and 8 awards were made, totaling $8 million. Round 2 concluded in August 2018, and the remaining $2 million was awarded among 4 grantees. Program 2 Program 2 had $10 million also available, $2 million per supervisorial district. An exception to the cash match requirement for schools serving predominantly low-income families was provided. 7 awards were made, totaling over $5.6 million in round 1. For round 2 of the program, on March 24th, 2020, the board approved 7 awards totaling over $3.8 million. And on November 17th, 2020, the board approved an award of $500,000. So proposed program number 3 seeks to continue to build upon those first 2 programs. It offers $5 million in available funding. It acknowledges the diverse equity needs within the county. And we incorporated the Parks Department incorporated a demographic map with district boundaries reflecting the 2021 redistricting. The map features 5 equity tiers, which you'll see in a later slide, with tier number 1, the darkest green, representing the areas with the most need of an all-inclusive playground. To reiterate, the equity criteria includes policies and scoring criteria to give preference for projects in the areas of highest need. Evaluation factors include a provision to assign additional points for projects in Tier 1 and Tier 2 to provide a competitive advantage. The current trajectory, go back one. We're striving to meet board approval and award before the end of calendar year 2024. This slide depicts the scoring criteria in more detail. As you can see, the 4 primary categories include project design, location and access of playground, project readiness, and maintenance program. And the map here depicts the various AIPG equity rankings. The 2 bottom tables, on the one on the most lower left is the AIPG tiers are based on aggregation of layers with values reflecting contributions to suitability. These layers include with relative weights and data sources in parentheses. And you can see below the various criteria that constitute the equity lens that was developed as part of this process. And then the table just to the right of that includes the equity tier rankings with their various colors, and the map depicts that. And so the current proposed timeline is in this slide here, and it reflects the culmination of these various dates in December 2024, with staff presenting a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for approval. All right, that concludes the presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you. And before we go to questions, I'm going to go to our clerk and see if we have any public comment.
We have no speakers on the item.
All right. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn to my vice chair, and he will begin our conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been an interesting exercise over the last 6-7 years. I think one thing that's undeniable is that the projects themselves have been unbelievably well received and generated enthusiasm. And you know, sometimes you try something and it works out, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's the nature of the process. I think the piece of this that has worked well, that I have been so pleased by, when I first proposed this back in 2017, you know, it was with no expectation, given the cost of these facilities, that a $10 million grant, $2 million in each of 5 districts, was going to, you know, sort of get the job done. Quite the opposite. It was designed to leverage additional funds, whether they were city funds or school district funds or state funds or some combination of the above or other funds. And that has clearly happened. This is one of those times when, you know, our seed funding really did generate support from other sources. The other thing, and this is perhaps even more important in my view, is that, you know, when we did this, there really were only 2 all-inclusive playgrounds that were front and center, at least, in the county. One was the Rotary Play Garden, and then the other was which was in San Jose, and the other was the Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto. And part of the goal here was to, by multiplying the number of these facilities, to get people to start thinking about this as the norm rather than the exception. That all-inclusive playgrounds, you know, that 10, 25, 50 years from now, people would look back and say, can you ever believe that at one point we didn't have all-inclusive playgrounds, that was not just the expectation? And I think that's happening. We aren't there yet, but it's happening. It's like, well, if we're going to do a playground, if we're going to rehab one, if we're going to build a new one, you know, let's talk all-inclusive. It starts to become the starting point in the conversation instead of something that somebody has to drag people to kicking and screaming, and I think that's great. We had great response. Candidly, the second program was a little bit rushed. In fact, in 2018, because Supervisor Yeager had such great response in his district that he wanted to make sure that the second grant program got rolled out before he left the board, and we were able to accommodate that, but I do think it ended up rushing the process a little bit. Along the way, Supervisor Cortese made the argument on essentially equity grounds that expecting the sort of same level of matching funds was perhaps problematic because some parts of the county might have resources that could match, some parts didn't. And I candidly don't remember quite how we managed that set of issues, but we did. I remember it was an argument that I think all of us were responsive to and did that as well. So here we are now, and the one piece, and there's a question here about timing, and I know you're struggling to put everything into the tight box before the end of this calendar year. I think the equity dynamics play out a little bit differently for projects that are genuinely going to be what I'll call regional assets, meaning they're not just I mean, we have we have an AIPG grant in place at Addison Elementary School in Palo Alto, California. Now, I think that's pretty clearly going to serve the kids at Addison Elementary School in Palo Alto. Maybe on the weekends, it serves the larger community, but probably folks aren't coming all the way from Gilroy to get to that facility the way they do to get to the San Jose Rotary Play Garden or the all-inclusive playground at Mitchell Park in Palo Alto. So, you know, I know there are some folks out there talking about trying to create regional facilities or facilities at existing locations that serve county-wide populations. There's even been a community college that's approached me about this as well, which struck me as an interesting approach. So I guess I would ask staff, is there a way to fold into your criteria regional serving facilities or facilities that are designed to be beyond the immediate catchment area of a park, playground, whatever?
So if I understand the question, Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive, I believe given our scoring criteria to achieve what I think I'm hearing you ask for, we would set up points associated with a project that could be defined as regional serving. We'll have to figure out the definition of that. But to answer your question, I think there is a way to recognize and sort of uplift those type of projects.
Well, I think that would be helpful. And then the other thing, if we could get the slide that showed the schedule back up for just a second, I have a question and a suggestion / request. I don't know who's in charge of the slides. I just know I'm not. There you go. Thank goodness. There we go. Is September the 10th the date because A, you're trying to move it along, and B, we happen to have a board meeting that day when this might get approved? Would it be,
Yes.
Would it be possible to make this work with a September, what is it, 24th? Is that our second meeting?
That is the second meeting. We can't, so it's on the, we went through the agenda process, and so it's ready to go. I think what we can do is caucus with staff. The challenge will be, how we define a regional serving project. But let us make the effort to see if we can do a supplemental report that captures that. And if the board desires more discussion or more refinement, certainly we can come back to the September 24th board meeting. And I think, while it's even tighter in terms of a schedule, we could make it work.
See if I can turn this on. Can you hear me without it? Okay. So yes, that will become pretty tight for us, but it'll
So
be 2
sorry.
weeks or 3 weeks, sorry.
I think our clerk is going to ask you to please turn on that microphone so that you can be in the record. Sorry, Peggy, I know that I intervened.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I got it. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Let me through the chair. Let me just ask that my interest in the second meeting rather than the first was not really driven by the criteria issue that I raised. It's raised by the fact that today is the 3rd of September, and I don't think there's a snowball's chance we're going to get the word out to people adequately for the public to engage on the criteria and the process by the 10th. I just, and the fact that there's no one here today from any part of the community, I just think we need a little time to spread the word, and I don't want to disadvantage any community by them not knowing or being made aware or engaged. So what I'd like to do is move that we receive the report. I don't want to preclude any additions from you, Madam Chair, so if you've got some in a minute, but just to put a motion in play, I'd like to move that we receive the report and direct staff to come back on the second meeting with grant procedural guide lines for the board to review and approve, and that as part of that, that there be some option for us to consider, who knows how we'll act as a full board, that deals with what I'll call projects of a regional nature, as opposed to more local serving projects.
Before I second that, I want to ask a question about your, what you intend with the regional playground versus local serving. I heard you say that there's a school, a local school, I think in Palo Alto, that might have received funding in the past, and that would be local serving versus regional. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and I don't know how staff will want to define this. Frankly, I think I've given you a challenging assignment, because when there were only two of them, Madam Chair, the Rotary Play Garden and the Magical Bridge in Palo Alto and Rotary Play Garden in San Jose, they were both, quote, regional projects because they were the only two available. So if you had a youngster you wanted to make this kind of park available to, those were the two places you had to go. And in fact, what both parks saw, in my understanding, is folks from not just throughout the county, but throughout the Bay Area, and in some cases, people literally, if they were passing through from other parts of the state or the nation or even the world, came to use them. So they were regional. But now, the good news, which presents a challenge, is that as we have more and more of these, by virtue of our grant and the participation of others who funded, I think that regionality, if that's a word, is less likely to be the case. So I think, a neighborhood park, whatever that definition is probably a neighborhood park, even if it's an all-inclusive playground at this point. But I think there may be some facilities or services that can demonstrate that that the use is more wide-ranging, that folks come from farther afield, and I'd like some ability to reflect and respect that, because then the assessment about equity becomes a somewhat different assessment. If you're saying, well, it's not just the people in I'll make it up, a mile radius, it's the people in a 25-mile radius or a 50-mile radius or whatever is deemed reasonable.
Okay. I do have, I think from previous rounds, some of the schools, I think in my district, were the ones who received some funding. And, excuse me, and that might qualify under what you have just described as local serving rather than regional. And one of the areas that I'm concerned about in my particular district, Supervisor Simidian, is San Martin, because they have one playground. And they're not a city, they're not a town. They are, under our jurisdiction, and for a playground like this, Morgan Hills School District would be the most appropriate entity to go through. They would be the ones handling it. And so then that would, then by your criteria, make them more local serving, even though that school district is not necessarily, I mean, it serves that community, but I would say that it would be, even if it wasn't a regional asset, that it is a needed asset when there's, and you should see the playground.
Yeah.
And then there isn't any other access for that community. And so I'm trying to balance meeting the need that and I completely agree with you that I think that these kinds of playgrounds should be more regional serving, and although, in this particular example, it's against what I just finished saying. And then I put my hat as a mom, because my son needed physical therapy, and when he no longer qualified for early start, I had to look for my own services and opportunities for him to be able to have that movement. And so I did Gymboree. I would pay and take them to places like that. And I'm just super grateful to you and others who have led in all-inclusive playgrounds that, we don't have to pay for a service like this, that we can actually use a public playground to be able to have our children take advantage of this. And yet I'm still trying to find the balance between, should it be local serving, and should there be a higher point system for regional serving? Because it, like you said, it does shift in terms of equity and in terms of who we are going to fund. And so I'm at a bit of a, if you understand it, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, I think this conversation highlights the challenge that I've asked staff to take on, frankly. And I did not mean to suggest that something that was regional would per se have higher standing. What I was trying to say was that something that was regional might have a different equity score if you look at the composition of the community that the region contains. So that, for example, when I use the Addison Elementary School and say it's local serving in the context of the fact that even though there are pockets of need in Palo Alto, the community is unabashedly prosperous, and there are other Magical Bridge all-inclusive playgrounds. They both happen to be a Magical Bridge in this case. One in El Carmelo Elementary School just down the road. Now, as you and I both know, people who live in neighborhoods and cities think that if it's more than 2 blocks away, it's not in their neighborhood. So, and then there is the original Magical Bridge playground at what's called Mitchell Park in Palo Alto. So that's why I say the Addison project is a small project designed to serve a school. So you wouldn't call that one regional. And some of that may be objective, some of that may be subjective, I don't know. But in the example you gave, if you, what I heard you say, and I don't know the territory obviously the way you do, is San Martin might best be served by a regional project that happened to be on a school campus because the school district is best equipped to be the venue for a regional project that is local serving, but also regional. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, no, I described that incorrectly. No, what I meant was that there is a playground in San Martin already that is very sad. And there is no access to any, well, they have something in Morgan Hill, but because what I thought you were saying was that there would be more priority or more points towards projects that would fulfill more of a regional need rather than a local serving need, that they would then not receive the same points in terms of, because they would be more local serving rather than regional. And the other piece is because there's the entity that would qualify or apply under this would be the Morgan Hill School District is the closest entity that could apply for them for this particular one.
Got it. No, and what I was trying to say, and apparently did not say as well as I might have, is that the regional nature of an asset needs to, if it's a regional asset, however that's defined, then the composition of the communities, plural, that are served needs to be considered, not just the immediate vicinity. So, if
I'm a little at odds with that because let me just finish this, and Ms. Gallegos, you could join in on this conversation, maybe allow, maybe you're seeing this conversation, hearing it, and can add some context or some, help us with this. But what I'm thinking is that then we would continue to maybe choose projects that are local serving, but qualify them as regional because they have the potential to serve more people. And that would put like my group in San Martin at a disadvantage. And not saying like the group in San Martin by any means I'm trying to get them into this, or, you know, wink, wink, this is the group that I want. But I'm just using them as an example because they're so disadvantaged in terms of you know, not having any real government in terms of their I don't even know if to call them a town or city, an organized community. I'm not sure, but they have that level of disadvantage. So anyways, Ms. Gallegos, maybe you can help add a little light to this.
Thank you. And I do hope this comment will be helpful to both of you. First of all, we've listened to your respective interests, and we're taking all of this in. The point I want to make is that the criteria and points attached to very specific things only are pertinent when you have more applications than funding. Based on our prior survey and outreach, and I want to uplift a comment that Mr. Aguilera made in his presentation, I'm more worried about getting nonprofits or schools or cities get their applications in on time. So I'm less worried about whether we're having making hard choices, but rather to work with agencies to get them in. So we don't believe at this time, and we said this, now we can't guarantee it, but we have every reason to believe we're not going to be fighting over nonprofit A versus school B.
Right, and actually you bring up a really good point, because the other piece that I was worried about, and I completely understand, I'm happy to support fast tracking this. As you mentioned in your comments, Supervisor Simidian, you all fast tracked when Supervisor Yeager was leaving, so that work could get done. I'm happy to do that as well. And so my question for administration or for staff is, in lieu of the workshops that we normally would have and application reviews that would help maybe some of the smaller groups like San Martin, or I'm sorry, I keep saying San Martin, I should probably switch groups, okay? Group X out in my district. What can we do to help facilitate some of that information into those communities and groups and for folks?
Well, that's a great question. And to your point, our schedule is a bit more compressed. And so, as I said, I'm more worried about getting applications in that meet, you know, our the minimum requirements. We have lists of interested parties that have communicated with us in the past. We are happy to work with each of the board offices through your networks as well to get the information out. And if there's a particular group that you think requires some more support, we're happy to devote those staff resources to do that.
Perfect. And you know, Supervisor Simidian, I think this question about serving regional or serving local, you know, I don't know what's best in terms of, obviously I want the most community to benefit from the playground. Exactly where, I think, will be up to each supervisor and the groups who are willing to step up and say, you know what, these are our needs. And then, of course, following what Director Rocha had shared with me previously, and Director Aguilera, what you reported on in terms of equity, because that is also something, you know, this overlay of equity needs to always drive us. But even if we were, you know, even if that's the North Star, if the groups aren't coming in and they're not applying, and we're not helping facilitate some of those connections, we're not going to have any applications to begin with, right? So I think sometimes we are bound by the folks who apply rather than having other things in terms of guiding principles. And so I don't know what will happen, and we can help some of those outcomes by tapping into some of the groups and letting them know. And that's why this question about what are we going to do in lieu of fast tracking? Let's fast track, and like you said, Supervisor Simidian, the 10th is probably not realistic. I'm happy to support it for later on in the month to provide that opportunity for new groups to come in and have that opportunity to submit. So, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Would it help a little bit as well, Madam Chair, if, because the motion included, consideration by staff of the implications of regional serving facilities in the equity mix. Why don't, if I said, if the motion said implications, comma, if any, comma, which kind of leaves it up to staff to sort of figure out, how to thread that needle.
I love it.
Okay.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, Supervisor Simidian. That's helpful.
At the risk of prolonging the conversation, is the intent
It's a good conversation.
that the regional aspect get incorporated with the equity scoring criterion, or I saw that as an additional criterion that was added to the
I think
score
that's
sheet?
where I was inarticulate, and let me try one more time to clarify and hope I don't muddle it even more. My point was, the equity issue is the equity issue is in large measure a function of who will this park serve. Now, if the park serves only people within a couple of miles, then that's how you have to look at the service population and do some of your equity assessments. Alternatively, if the park is going to service this area, then you need to look at the people in that area. And that could be a group that is more prosperous, less prosperous, more diverse, less diverse. You don't know. So I was just sort of saying, let's take a look at that as we go to make sure that we're not defining a project's equity numbers based on this area if it's really this area.
And let me just say that I think the overlay of equity, it will be interesting to see when you bring back this analysis, because I'll be honest, if the group is smaller yet much needed, we are fulfilling the equity criteria, right? Even if it isn't a regional playground, but it's the most needed, right? And they have all these factors, and they meet all these factors that you've outlined here. So I'll leave it to you to come back and share with us about how that would really play out. And there is no risk in extending a really great conversation that we're having, because I think this allows for us to anticipate potentially additional questions that our colleagues will have. We're a little sample size of the board, right? And part of what we're doing is helping figure out this so we can be better prepared for our board. So thank you so much for that. And Ms. Clerk.
Vice Chairperson Simidian.
Aye.
Chairperson Arenas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Perfect. Okay, so now we are going to item number 9. And this is Supportive Housing Dashboard and Veterans Report. Welcome. As you get settled in, I'll just let folks know that this is our last report, but we still have reports from our directors.
Good afternoon. KJ Kaminsky, Acting Director for the Office of Supportive Housing. I'd like to introduce Hillary Armstrong, our Deputy Director, and Laura Ortega Fuentes, who is our Continuum of Care Manager. And this report this month includes, just a note that it includes the June update and the August report. And with that, I'll hand it off to the team.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. As KJ said, we are including 3 updates along with our supportive housing dashboard, so we can start with the dashboard. Our community plan goals, progress on the community plan to end homelessness. You can see here that we are 79% to our goal of housing 20,000 people by 2025. We also have a goal of reducing annual inflow of people becoming homeless by 30%, and this is calculated by the number of households that complete a first-time housing assessment. And as you can see, we are below the inflow of individuals from 2019, but we are having a 7% uptick since last year. So we're keeping our eye on this number and having more conversations about it, but it does indicate the strong need to continue to prioritize efforts like the homelessness prevention program and also developing affordable housing in our community. Next slide, please. This is a month-to-month comparison of the inflow into homelessness with housing placements. As you can see, we have a bit of a higher number in June. And a lot of the times when you see higher numbers, it can mean that there was a PSH development that has opened. I think this one correlates to our Seco Court in Milpitas. I also wanted to point out that on average, we have 221 people placed per month into housing. Moving on to homelessness prevention. This is a program that identifies households at risk for experiencing homelessness and provides financial assistance and case management to regain stability. So this is one of our core strategies to end homelessness in the region, and we really want to highlight how exponentially the program has grown since 2016. Our annual capacity was at 200, and now we're 2,240 in terms of how many households we have the capacity to serve. This program has been really successful and launched through Destination Home launched this program in 2017 as a pilot, and we've seen such success. And we do want to provide the update that over the last year, we've been working with Destination Home to move the oversight of the prevention programs to the county. And so we've been working with them on a plan to roll that out without having any impact on program participants. And part of that effort was to launch an RFP, which happened in January of 2024, to select a network coordinator. So that Sacred Heart Community Services has been selected to be our network coordinator. And we're continuing to implement that transition plan. And I think one of the things that we're excited about is being able to more fully integrate prevention programs into our core safety net services that the county provides. In terms of homelessness prevention outcomes, we see that of the 3,015 households assisted in fiscal year 2024, 96% did remain stably housed while receiving prevention assistance. Those who exited did exit to permanent housing destinations for the most part at 96%. The reason for assistance continues to be largely income loss. So this continues to be a trend. Some financial numbers here. We can see that the vast majority, at 84%, are rental assistance transactions that are provided for our households. In the last fiscal year, we provided, I think it was $14.7 million in financial assistance, and so you can see the breakdown of average assistance per household here. In terms of demographics, we do serve mostly households with children, and most likely the head of households are women at 72%. For age tiers, 56% do fall within the 25 to 44 age range. And you can see here our race and ethnicity breakdowns. 63% are Hispanic, Latina, Latino. And this really corresponds with how we serve majority families, and this population tends to be families that need assistance as well, so that correlates. Our temporary housing programs are, you can go to the next slide, are going to be the focusing on emergency shelter, interim housing, transitional housing, and safe parking. For the capacity, we have the ability to serve 2,692 households. You can see that 51% are emergency shelter, and then a quarter of those are interim housing. Thank you. Here you can see the breakout by housing type. With exit destination, our goal is always to strive for permanent destinations when people exit our program. And so for interim housing, you can see that we're at 65% of those exiting interim housing into permanent destinations. Permanent supportive housing. This is a program that provides a long-term rental assistance, case management, and supportive services for those the most vulnerable, chronically homeless participants in our community. We have the capacity to serve 4,071 households. Of the currently enrolled 3,989 households, 94% are currently housed. The remaining are either in housing search or awaiting their unit to be ready. And this program specifically, the CCP, which is Care Coordination Project, is about 60% of our PSH capacity is in this project, and it's really just a multi-agency effort to really ensure that case management is effective for our populations that we serve. You can see that the retention rate is at 96%, which is great. And on the right, you can see that medical services and behavioral health services continue to be really something that all our households really need to be connected to as PSH serves those that have disabling chronic disabling conditions that really impact their overall health and housing. This is really a critical service. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to our clerk and see if there's any public comment.
We have no speakers on the item.
Okay, so Vice Chair, wondering if you have any comments. All right, so I will start. First of all, I just want to thank you for the report. I really love that you were highlighting all of this amazing work that's happening in South County Compassion Center and for doing this unhoused community, for doing what you're doing for our unhoused community in South County. So I'm really looking forward to your report at the next Hewlett meeting regarding the year-round homeless shelter capacity and resources for South County. And so I wanted to just ask you if there was anything preliminary you can share about the report.
I'm going to defer to KJ, actually. Sorry, could you read? This is a report for the report for the September 19th meeting?
The year-round homeless shelter capacity and resources in South County. Yeah, yes.
I don't have a report yet, but we are working on it, and it will be ready to share that as part of, this is the one that was part of a larger temporary housing report back as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I thought I'd just try. So I appreciate it. All right. The other piece that I was really glad to hear about was that there's so many families finding stable housing. So that was another really good thing. There's, I think, in the report or in the slides, it was like about 600 families that were awaiting placement for temporary shelter. I wanted to just learn from you all what's the process of placing homeless families into shelter, given the wait list. And then I think there was some public comment in our last board meeting and calls that we have gotten, I think a couple of us, in terms of children living in tents and things of that sort. And so, are they getting any casework management that's being done in the meantime while they're in shelter? Or how are we dealing with families, if you could share that with me?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chairperson. In terms of the process, the majority of family shelters are coordinated, placement for those are coordinated through our shelter hotline, the Here For You hotline. We do have a family waiting list, and when one of the benefits of centralized hotline, even though we may not be able to place everybody immediately, folks are also offered a referral to what's called housing problem solving. And that is really a creative conversation with anybody who's calling and asking for assistance to say, is there anything else we can do to resolve your homelessness right now, whether that's mediation with a landlord or a family member that they're staying with, or one-time quick financial assistance. So many of the folks that are calling the hotline for shelter are also taking advantage of that that assistance that's available through the hotline. Of course, it's all very it's driven by what the folks calling in are willing and interested in terms of services.
Got it. Get it. And how about when there isn't, those folks aren't making those calls, rather than our stakeholders are making those observations, and for very obvious reasons, a lot of families are not going to say, we're living in a tent, and there's a level of endangerment, right, potentially for their children, and the potential removal, right? I mean, there's a lot of factors that I think parents may be worried about. And so how do we balance that concern? Because obviously parents are doing the best that they can with what they have. And so in order to encourage parents who are unhoused, who may be in the streets, how would we carry out that work?
Yeah, I think thank you for the question, Chairperson. I think the response I would give is that our supportive housing system has resources available in many different areas. So if shelter bed isn't available on that given night, we may be able to send outreach workers out to talk with the family to help make connections to other resources that are available. And we also work with folks who may be unsheltered in applying for affordable housing or finding other possible resources that might help them in the community. Unfortunately, we know the need is greater than the resources available at any given time, but we work with our providers across the community, so outreach, shelter, housing, to try to leverage any available resources for each individual family.
I appreciate that. I would love if you could connect with that advocate who was on the phone, and we can talk about who that was. And because I think she mentioned there was about 7 different families that she had identified. And that concerns me, obviously, that I want to make sure that our kiddos are safe and don't want them separated from their parents. Obviously, that's the best place for them. But at the same time, we have to carry out this work gingerly so that we don't damage that composition of their family, right? So we can talk offline about this, but if we're starting to notice, and our stakeholders are starting to notice more of a trend, I think we have to be strategic about how it is that we're engaging those families so that we're not discouraging any reports or discouraging them coming to us. As you well know, there, excuse me. When we speak about housing and you go to any of these housing coalition meetings and engagement forums, you learn that a lot of women who are single are impacted. We've seen it in the data as well, especially single women of color. And one of the things that they do is rent a hallway, a living room, a room, something that just puts a roof over their head. It may not be the most appropriate, but it's the best that they can do. And so, excuse me, a lot of them are able to stay out of our radar in terms of help. But I think I've said this to you before, I don't think that that is appropriate housing, and it creates other social issues such as, of course, sexual assault and sexual abuse, and if they don't have access, of course, to quality childcare, which typically, it's super expensive, and I know that there's a difference in terms of our definition of what we identify as unhoused. So if there's a roof over their heads, they're housed. But I also think that there's a question that we need to continue to ask, and how do we answer, and how do we strategize on answering that question about adequate housing, because it isn't adequate, and it isn't appropriate, and it's not it's not for the sake of removing children from the care of their parents, but it's to provide those folks with a higher placement in terms of permanent housing. One of the things that I was observing, that there was a higher number of permanent, that there was more temporary and especially permanent housing for whites over Latinos compared to the prevention programs. And so it also speaks to equity, right? And so I want to know if it was, what does that do to? If you could help me understand that.
Chairperson, I'm sorry, I don't think I've understood the question. Related to equity, you referenced permanent supportive housing and prevention, but could you repeat it just to make sure we respond?
Sure. So what I'm saying is that the temporary and especially the permanent housing, there is more, and this is based on your slides, when you compare, there's more whites than Latinos being served, and so I'm asking that question in terms of why.
Thank you for the question, and I'm taking a lot of these because I've been working on this report for many, many years and have been able to see some of the trends, and much of this, much of the race and equity data is sometimes based on what the capacity of that type of program is. So if, for example, we know that in our unhoused population, families have higher percentages of Latina individuals, whereas single adults tend to be, are more higher percentage white African American other populations. If we have more single adult shelter beds compared to the whole, then the people being served in those programs may reflect that population type. So the snapshot that we provide in these reports is about the population being served in one specific type of intervention. And that said, it doesn't tell the entire story of equity across our supportive housing system. So when you see temporary housing, for example, perhaps a higher percentage of specific population, it might be because there's more single adults beds than there are family beds, which is true across for our whole system, even though we've been working very hard to increase family beds. And in fact, prior to 2020, we had about 88 family shelter units, and we're now almost to 500 due to the efforts across our community. So maybe the next report, if it would be helpful, we could look at family, single adults, and break that out a little bit clearer to help demonstrate who is being served and look at equity across those program types.
Thank you. And you know, the comparison is between the temporary and prevention programs versus, I'm sorry, the temporary and the permanent versus the prevention programs. But in the end, I get what you mean, and I appreciate what you're saying. I know it's a lot more difficult to serve our families. I get that, and I know that everybody's doing the best that they can. And when I hear that there's a 7-year-old in a tent, and the consequences of that in their school day, of being that kid that has the wrinkled and dirty clothes that kids may not want to play with, that may not have that daily bath, that may not have all the things that we know that make it really difficult in this childhood stage, it just really breaks my heart. And I know that it does probably the same to all of you. And so I ask these questions because we need to, right? We need to make sure that we keep those realistic, that's the reality, this is what's happening. And when it's impacting our children, to me, one thing is to have a person who's unhoused and who's an adult, but when our children are unhoused, it creates a different kind of sense of responsibility for me and the questions I will ask of you in terms of how our systems are going to shift. So anyways, I appreciate your answers, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, and we'll continue to have this conversation. But I also ask for systems to shift when there's trends that are happening, because that's what our systems have to do. And I know that you've all been very agile in doing that. And please let me know and let our board know how we can help support the shift in terms of resources if we're not providing you with what you need in order to be responsive in the way that needs to happen for our children and families. Go ahead.
Thank you, Supervisor Arenas and Chair Arenas. Hillary Armstrong, Deputy Director with the Office of Supportive Housing. Your points are very well taken, and I think all of us feel very personally affected by the stories and by the knowledge that there's so much need out there and this need to shift our systems. I will let you know also that we'll be coming back to the full board with our Heading Home third year update, probably at the first board meeting in November. And as part of that, doing a really deep analysis of these trends over the 3 years of the effort to house families. And I think you've seen throughout that campaign the infusion of additional one-time resources to try to address this need of families waiting for shelter and waiting for other resources, and just continually trying, just as KJ was explaining with the different levels of intervention and availability. So we'll be reporting back with a deeper dive on that as well.
I appreciate that. And I know that I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know and that you're facing, and that these are really difficult situations and we can't solve for everything. But you know, the reality is that we live with a lot of folks who are on the brink of leaving our county, leaving our city. And I was just thinking about last week, I went to my son's back to school night, and in one of, you go by each of the periods, and it was one of the periods that I was in, it was just a parent and myself. It just happened to be probably later periods, and so people started leaving. And maybe the reason why this person shared was because it was only her and myself there. But she she was asking for the teacher to make sure that her son was accountable with grades, and he needed to keep up a certain level of grades because he was in a sports team on campus, and she said, and she got to a kind of a frustrated point where she said, because if I'm making this sacrifice to stay here in this county, he needs to get the good grades, and he needs to be able to deliver these things because I'm battling staying here, and if his grades go down, I'm leaving. I can't make this sacrifice anymore, right? I have to go. And it just, it really hits me in terms of our working families that's how close they are, right? They're holding on to ensure that, and I heard, actually, just yesterday, I heard this again from another mom who is holding on to her daughter's school, and she's only staying there so that her daughter can graduate, but she'd love to move out of the area because it's expensive, and so. But these are our working families. So, anyways, it isn't very far away. These housing issues aren't very far away from us, right? Is my point, and a lot of the times we're not looking for these things. These instances just occur, and our advocates sometimes are our eyes and ears on the streets, and so we have to make sure that we continue to have our ear to the ground to ensure that the data that we're seeing and the people that we're calling is in line with what our strategies are internally, right? I mean, that's just part of what we need to do. So I appreciate that you're open to this and exploring this with me. So I appreciate that. So, anyways, thank you for all the hard work. I know that I'm talking to you about some things that are still missing, but it's not lost on me that this presentation is almost an inch thick, and that represents, just a lot of really good work that our county residents don't get to see. And so I just want to say thank you for all the really wonderful work. And I know in those graphs we showed how many people are actually getting permanently placed, and I don't want that also to be lost within my comments. There's a lot of really good work, and so thank you for continuing to not only just help our families, but our residents get back into some really good options. All right. So I think there's a motion.
I'll move the recommended action, which is simply to receive the report.
Perfect, and I'll second your motion.
Vice Chairperson Simitian.
Aye.
Chairperson Arenas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Okay, so lastly, we're going to go to item 10, the best part of this meeting, where we get to hear about all of our department activity reports, and we're going to start with Director Anciano with the Department of Planning and Development.
Can I just ask that we start with?
We will.
Because you always start with me.
Oh my!
I'm just asking. Are we having fun yet? Because I'm not.
We're always having fun,
Oh,
all right?
okay.
I will bring the confetti. Okay, so we will start at the other end of this dais.
I don't think you can because of how the agenda is, so I was just kidding. Maybe next time, right? Okay, I'll start. So, Jacqueline Anciano, Director of Planning and Development. We're excited to just note that we are at a 12.5% vacancy rate. That's great for us, trust me. We were at 25% earlier in the year. So this is great. As of this past April, we were at 16%, and so 12.5% is really good. It really is. It's an improvement from 25%, so we're excited about that. We have posted our entitlements for our plans for AB 2234, and that's surrounding the new assembly bill that requires our building department to review applications within 30 days. It's not 30 work days, it's 30 calendar days. So we're hoping to get that legislature lined up with our 884 dates for our land use entitlements, which is actually, if we can get them lined up, the review periods, that would be wonderful. We have, as you know already, we launched our home hardening, which was referred from D5, a constituent. So we're pleased with that. And we have hired, it's been a 2-year period. One of our positions that we hired was our senior civil engineer, and that was after 2 years of recruitments. So we're excited to have our senior civil engineer. That is also in our grading department. So we're looking to get current on a lot of our review of our permits, our grading permits, and so forth. So that's our report for now. We have a lot. Let me just touch on one thing, our housing element. We did submit our housing element to HCD. It was not certified. We are responding to the comments that they have submitted to us, and we will work through those comments as quickly as possible and resubmit back to HCD. Of course, working with our county council, making sure that we have answered the questions as best to our ability. So that is where we are.
Thank you so much.
You're
Force be with you on that one. Okay, so we are going to continue down the road with Roads and Airports Department. It was an unintended pun, but there it is.
There we go. Chris Lamb, Deputy Director in Roads and Airports. So summer months are very busy in Roads and Airports. Our maintenance crews are just close to wrapping up 59 miles of chip seal throughout the county, with I think just a few areas left in South County to complete that. Our road maintenance engineers really conducted 2 separate microsurfacing projects. So those are preventative maintenance on some of our more urbanized areas. So they completed both the 2023 and 2024 projects, which is close to another 40 miles worth of microsurfacing. The road crews following the chip seal program will move into some of our winter storm prep, so making sure that ditches, culverts, and inlets are all free and clear of debris. And then on our capital side, really 3 major projects that were awarded since the last Hewlett meeting. We've awarded a repaving project on Lawrence Expressway between Homestead Road down to Westgate, repaving on San Tomas between El Camino and Highway 101, and then a bridge replacement project down on Uvis Road over Yagas Creek. So all 3 of those are either just getting started or will get started soon, and all 3 will be finishing up in 2025. And then finally, on the storm damage side of things from our 2023 storms, we've completed all the temporary repairs on roads. So all damaged sites are at least temporarily open with at least 1 lane as of earlier this spring, late spring, early summer. And our engineers have shifted into some of the more complex design management of some of these projects that entail a little more work and coordination with some of the resource agencies. And that's the report from Roads and Airports.
Through the chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lamb, I know my office has been in touch. I do want to express my appreciation for the repairs that have been made. I know it's a daunting challenge, but for folks who live with this, it's daunting as well, as I know you know. Whenever anything is taking a long time, I reflect on the fact that our nation fought and won a world war on 2 continents in a little over 3.5 years. So the notion that a road repair would take probably 3 years for permanent repair is a little troubling. I guess regarding the permanent solution to fix old Santa Cruz Highway, where the traffic, as I understand it now, is currently 1 lane with stop controls. As you can imagine, my constituents are pleased that their road is open with 1 lane and stop controls, but they are now understandably concerned about the status of the permanent repairs. And as you've indicated, and as your roads July 2024 monthly report indicates, quote, engineering, design, and environmental permitting have now commenced, with construction planned for summer of 2025. So, that means that if we get to the end of 25, it will have taken 3 years to get this road back to full functionality. Is that, let me just ask, is that still the estimated timeline?
Yes, that's still the target for us, yes.
And is there information you can share that would help folks understand why the repairs are likely at least a year away?
Well, unfortunately, we did not get wartime delegation of authority to complete the road repairs. So the resource agencies do allow for some flexibility in emergency repairs, but it really relates to work that's done within the first 30 days, right? So once we get to the point where it's considered a project, then the resource agencies do want to make sure that all the necessary cultural surveys and environmental impacts are studied and evaluated, and that they have their opportunity to provide input on those projects. So that process itself usually takes about 6 to 9 months, working with the various resource agencies. So that would be the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the California State Water Board.
Well, looking through the chair, looking at item 13 on our agenda, which was placed on consent, Rhodes is reporting there that it has executed 3 permit to enter property agreements for addresses that are along Old Santa Cruz Highway. And just to be clear, are these agreements, well, they're described, quote, as agreements that, quote, document existing biological and cultural resources prior to repairing the road. Are they part of this process that you just described in terms of developing and permitting the permanent solution?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. There's, I think, three or four of them. 3 were private properties, just residential private properties, and the last one was a larger parcel owned by San Jose Water.
All right. Well, anything you can do to, appropriately expedite all this, I think, is going to be meaningful and important. I also note on that July 2024 monthly report that you've identified 6 repair sites, 5 of which are in District 5, my district, and I think there's one in District 1, if I remember correctly, that are eligible for emergency response funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So besides the funding from the federal government, which certainly is helpful given our budget challenge, does the eligibility for that emergency response funding help make these repairs in a more timely way? I'm remembering I was very specific in asking when we allocated $14 million for repairs, is that enough? And we were told, yeah, that's what it is. So do these federal funds help us move things along?
Yeah, so there are really 2 sources of funding for these emergency slides or damages. One is the FHWA program, the other would be FEMA. So the FHWA program applies to certain roads, and it's hard to describe them because they don't always make sense which ones are federal aid related. But these 6 sites are federal aid related, and in addition to the funding itself, which is absolutely critical to get the repairs made, it's also a program that we're much more familiar with. So the FHWA monies is routed through Caltrans. It's very similar to the program that the department uses with our highway bridge replacement program. So that all of that money comes through FHWA as well. So we're very familiar with the characters that we're interacting with, the types of information they want to see, and just generally the process. So these 6 projects will most likely be the first ones that are completed, just because of the process is so well known to us.
Well, last question through the chair. Looking at your same monthly report, by my count, there were 8 repair sites in my district alone that were not FHWA eligible. So let me just ask, what's the plan for those sites moving forward in terms of their repairs if we don't have eligibility in those cases?
Right, so all the remaining sites throughout the county, we're working with FEMA to identify the necessary repairs. make our case for reimbursement and proceed forward with the repair. So every single site is in some step with FEMA to receive the necessary approvals to make those repairs, those permanent repairs.
Just so I understand, on those 8 sites where you're having the conversation with FEMA, is work underway, notwithstanding the fact that the conversations are ongoing with FEMA?
Yeah, so staff in roads and airports have ranked or prioritized the various locations. And so both the FHWA and the FEMA sites have all been, I guess, triaged in a sense to identify which projects we're prioritizing staff to work on.
I'm going to pressure a little bit more on this because I want to make sure I understand it and that I can give my constituents a clear and accurate answer. Will those 8 projects be delayed until such time as resolution has been had with FEMA?
We are proceeding regardless of the status with FEMA.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep asking that question in the limited time I have available the next few months. I don't mean this disrespectfully of our friends at FEMA, but if we wait until things are resolved with FEMA, we could be waiting a while. And I just want to make sure that that's not a deterrent to moving forward expeditiously.
No, so so through the chair, there were a little over 30 damaged sites as a result of those 2023 storms. More than a dozen are totally complete as of this time, and even those completed sites, we haven't gotten full approval from FEMA yet, but that didn't stop us from proceeding with the sites that we were able to complete already.
Pleased to hear it. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lamb.
Absolutely. Okay, so that wraps up roads and airports, and we're going to move on to Deputy Director Aguilera.
Joe Aguilera, Deputy Director, Parks and Recreation Department. Park visitation remains robust despite summer winding down and school being back in session. This summer, county park campgrounds were averaging 97 to 100% occupancy during the weekends. Park rangers were busy providing campfire programs and assisting families new to camping with camping setup, etiquette, and activity recommendations. Park maintenance staff also remained busy keeping parks and amenities clean and well-maintained. Our parks waste hauler estimates that 177 tons of trash were hauled away from county parks during this summer season. A new trail called Ojo de Agua Trail is being constructed at Coyote Lake, Harvey Bear Ranch County Park. It's a 1.5-mile natural surface trail located at the Coyote Canyon property of the park and is anticipated being completed in October of this year. After a winter of seasoning and hardening, the department will be hosting a dedication in spring of 2025, and board offices will be invited to attend. A few upcoming events. Chick-Talk Family Day will be occurring on Saturday, September 14th, celebrating the rich history at Chick-Talk Park. Also, La Fuente at Bernal Rancho on Saturday, September 21st. We'll be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month and part of the Binational Health Week. And finally, Fall Festival will be occurring at Marshall Cottle Park on Saturday, October 5th, and that event celebrates the valley's rich agricultural history.
That does sound like fun. What did you say the Coyote Lake trail was called? Ojo de what?
Ojo de Agua Trail.
Ojo de Agua. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. I'm going to ask you about that later on because that seems so interesting. That's going to finish up, you said, in October.
Correct.
Quick question through the chair.
Absolutely. Please
Thank
do.
you. We were so caught up in the conversation earlier about all-inclusive playgrounds, I forgot to ask a question about all-inclusive playgrounds then, so I'll use this opportunity now. And if you want to come back with an answer, that would certainly be fine. In the make sure all-inclusive playground grant program, Program 3 procedural guide that was in draft form today. On page 2 of the document, under available grant funds, it says for AIPG Program 3, $5 million is available countywide. My intent and understanding was that we were pursuing a $10 million program with $5 million to be funded this year and a target of $5 million for next year. And the reason we were comfortable with that was because we've learned that it takes these programs a fairly long time, frankly, to get. I mean, we've got some that have been years coming. And so we had a source of funds for this year. We identified that source of funds. But the goal was not to do $5 million and say, that's program 3. The goal was to do $10 million, $5 million this year, and then understanding the limitations of any board to commit a future board to find $5 million. Could I ask you all to explore that and report back when you come to the full board? And my office and I will follow up with you in the meantime as well.
We can do that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Supervisor Simitian, is that in the referral? Is that in your?
In the draft.
It's in the draft, but it was at the direction of.
Oh, if you mean back in, yeah, no, the original proposal was for $10 million. And I can understand why there's a little confusion, and it may just be semantic or it may not. That's why I want to ask. But the proposal was for $10 million. That's what the board voted on. And then the question was, well, where would the money come from? And the answer was, well, we've got this $5 million this year, and that was the $5 million we took action on in the budget process. So I'm not in any way disputing that, but I am raising the concern that I don't believe that was either the, I know it wasn't the intent, and I don't believe it was the direction in terms of the ultimate expenditures over the life of the Grant 3 program. So the Grant 3 program was, in my understanding, anticipated as a multi-year project, because that's how these things turn out. And we said, well, given our tough budget circumstance, let's find the money for this year, and we'll worry about the next year. And I'll be gone by then, but.
Okay. All righty. So you've got your question in.
To be clarified is my request.
Yes.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. Director Nolasco, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And as Vice Chair Smitty and Edgar Nolasco, your agency director for SEPA. In animal services, our Clear Shelters event was a great success. On August 25th, we successfully found 25 pets a new home. In our spade and neuter program, we are up to 3,268 spade and neuters. That is nearly 1,000 more than we had this year. We have this year than compared to last year.
What was the number again? I'm sorry.
3,268. So
Nice.
many thanks to our 2 hardworking veterinarians. In our weights and measures division, we did a little bit of a historical thing. We sealed our first ever electric car charger as part of our electric vehicle supply equipment, the EVCE program. We're ensuring that we're protecting the economic health of our EV drivers. Thanks to CDFA, we were able to borrow a testing device to test AC electric vehicle car chargers, and we tested about 120 EV chargers throughout that 1-month period. In our weed abatement program, many thanks to Supervisor Smitty for inviting us to the San Antonio Hills HOA meeting. Out of that, I was able to establish a connection with a council member for the city of Los Altos. We proceeded to establish a weed abatement contract with them, and then we're expanding our program from 12 to the 15 cities starting next season. And in vector control, we are having high amounts of West Nile virus activity, and we're doing many things to lower that, the rate of control. So far right now, we have done 11 adult mosquito treatments and have done treatment to about 61,000 parcels, around 29 square miles across the county. Part of those efforts, we have conducted 222,000 notifications through various efforts to inform the community of what we are doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those 25 pets finding homes is awesome, awesome ending to this. All right, wrap us up.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Arenas, Vice Chair Simidian. Just a few changes at our department since the last time we've met. We, in addition to our former director, Consuelo Hernandez, being promoted to Deputy County Executive, we also became a department officially on July 1st. The transition went really smoothly thanks to much support from the administration and the departments that we were both a part of as CEO and behavioral health. We're still building some capacity internally for the administrative responsibilities that we're assuming, but in many ways we had already functioned like a department, so much of the changes, or many of the changes, were really in the background. We're filling some key positions, but most of our customers, our clients, our partners were not even aware of the change, so I think that means it was successful because things kind of, our programs and operations really kept moving forward with no impact at all. On the operations side, just a couple of highlights. Our staff supported our Youth Action Board in hosting a 2-day retreat that provided some time for team building and strategic planning by youth and young adult leaders in our community. This board was instrumental in bringing youth homelessness demonstration program funding into our community a few years ago, and they continue to have play a major leadership role in our youth and young adult housing efforts. Our continuum of care, the national continuum of care competition, is also underway. Our COC team, that's the continuum of care team at OSH, we coordinate a community-wide competition to really submit our best projects to HUD for our community. In the last competition, our COC was awarded just under $40 million in total funding, and so they're working through this, the national, the local process in order to submit our competitive application, and just want to give a shout out to our COC team and our COC partners. It's really a true community effort, and this funding is so important, and we put so much energy into it because it's not a one-time grant. This is annual funding that we can renew year. And so that will be underway over the next couple of months. We also celebrated some major milestones recently. In July, we had the grand opening, July 17th, of Sango Court in Milpitas. And that is a 102-unit development with 40 PSH units and 7 VASH units. We also celebrated with our partners the Ira D. Hall wall raising. Instead of a groundbreaking, for this one they did a wall raising for this development in Sunnyvale, which is will be 176 units with 45 PSH units set aside. And then in October, we will be celebrating the Heartwood grand opening. This is the project formerly known as Crestview. Leasing up is starting this month. This is 49 units for families, youth, and individuals who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And then my last note is on another function of our office is to coordinate around inclement weather. And as we were sitting here in this meeting, we did issue a heat advisory for Wednesday, 11 a.m. through Thursday, 11 p.m. So please do share. Spread the word that the heat is, it will be, that we'll be under heat advisory, and the cooling centers that are open across the county are listed at preparescc.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We'll make sure that we include that in our social media as well. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a wonderful meeting. I'm going to adjourn and wish everybody a wonderful rest of the week.
Just a quick note
sorry,
to the
public
chair.
comment for this.
Yes, we have no
Thank
speakers
you.
on the item.
We do have a speaker.
No, we have no
don't.
speakers on the item.
Well, then what
Sorry
a
to disappoint.
disappointment. All right, well, next time we'll have a public speaker, hopefully. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, the acoustics in this space are just weird, and I sometimes, and you may have heard me say this, like somebody in the back row will have a conversation.